Desire is a paradox. It is one of the most natural experiences in the world, and yet one of the most silenced. For many women, desire does not live in the light of day, but in the shadows of their inner world. Why? Because from the very beginning, women are taught two scripts. On one hand, to be desirable, and on the other, not to desire too openly. To be wanted is acceptable. To want is dangerous. To please is rewarded. To ask for pleasure is seen as bold, even shameful. I remember once, a woman sitting in my office, her eyes darting between me and her husband. After a long silence, she whispered, "I've never told him what I truly want because I thought it would make me sound ungrateful." Imagine that. Decades of intimacy, decades of closeness, and yet her deepest cravings had never found a voice. She feared he would see her differently, that he might take offense, or that he might not understand at all. Her desire lived in her imagination, but never crossed into their shared reality. And here lies the great taboo, the fear of being judged for wanting too much, or wanting the wrong thing, or simply wanting it all. I have spoken to countless women who confess that they censor themselves in the very moments when honesty could bring them closer to their partners. They worry, what if he thinks I'm strange? What if he rejects me? What if he laughs? These questions become internal chains, holding back not only their words, but their entire erotic selves. But what fascinates me is not just the silence, but the resilience. Even when women do not speak, they still imagine, they still dream. Desire has a way of surviving in secret. It writes itself in diaries, it shows up in fantasies, it dances in daydreams. And yet, if it stays unspoken for too long, it becomes a ghost in the relationship, always present but never acknowledged. I often say to couples, secrets are not the enemy of intimacy. In fact, secrets can add layers of intrigue and eroticism, but silence, that heavy, suffocating silence, can kill intimacy. When a woman does not feel she can bring her desires into the relationship, she doesn't just silence her wants, she silences her voice. And when her voice disappears, so does a part of her vitality. What women secretly long for, then, is not necessarily a partner who can fulfill every single fantasy, or who always knows the right move. No. What they long for is a partner who invites curiosity without judgment, who can say with genuine interest, "Tell me more." They long for someone who understands that desire is not a list of demands, but a window into the inner life. They long for the safety to whisper their cravings, knowing that they will not be dismissed, mocked, or shamed. The taboo of desire is not about the things themselves. It is about the fear of being seen as too much or not enough. Women don't just want their needs met. They want their humanity acknowledged. And when that acknowledgement comes, when the silence breaks, when the taboo is no longer taboo, intimacy transforms from routine to revelation. One of the most overlooked elements of intimacy is play. We think of intimacy as serious, heavy, passionate, but rarely playful. And yet, if you ask women what they secretly crave, many will say something surprising. "I wish we could just laugh more together." It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But the truth is, laughter is one of the most powerful aphrodisiacs. Why? Because laughter is the sound of safety. When we laugh, our bodies soften, our defenses melt away, and suddenly, everything feels possible. Playfulness transforms the bedroom from a stage where performance is judged into a playground where curiosity is celebrated, and in that playground, women feel free. I remember working with a couple where the woman confessed, "I love him, but he's always so serious in bed. It feels like he's auditioning for a role he already has." What she meant was that he was so focused on doing things right that he forgot the joy of doing things lightly. She didn't want flawless choreography. She wanted improvisation. She wanted to be surprised. She wanted to laugh between kisses and giggles between gasps. That was her secret longing, not a new position, but a new attitude. Playfulness has the power to dissolve the tension that often builds up around intimacy. Think about how much pressure couples put on themselves to last longer, to please more, to impress. But pressure kills desire. Desire needs oxygen, space to breathe, to flow, to move unpredictably. Women know this instinctively, which is why they crave those moments of silliness, of tickling, of playful dares whispered in the dark. These are not distractions from intimacy, they are intimacy. There is something profoundly erotic about the unexpected, the way a partner suddenly scoops you into a spontaneous embrace, the way they whisper something mischievous when you least expect it. These small disruptions break routine and bring vitality back into connection. Women often tell me, I don't need fireworks every time. Sometimes I just need him to remind me that he sees me, that we can still play like we did at the beginning. Because playfulness is not just about jokes or laughter, it's about presence. It's about letting go of the outcome and entering the moment with curiosity. It's about saying, let's see what happens if, instead of, let's make sure we get this right. When women experience that kind of freedom, desire flows naturally. What fascinates me is how easily couples forget this. In the early days of romance, everything is playful. A glance becomes a game. A touch becomes a dare. Desire thrives in that environment of unpredictability. But over time, routine sets in, predictability replaces surprise, and suddenly, intimacy feels more like a duty than a delight. And yet, the secret many women hold is this: they don't necessarily want more intimacy. They want different intimacy. They want to recover the playfulness that once made everything feel alive. When playfulness enters the room, everything changes. The body relaxes, the imagination awakens, the pressure disappears, and in that space, connection deepens. Women secretly want their partners to remember that intimacy is not only about intensity, it is also about joy. That pleasure is not just about friction, it is about freedom. That love does not have to be solemn to be sacred. Sometimes it can be sacred precisely because it is silly. There is a reason why the dance between control and surrender is one of the most charged dynamics in intimacy. It is not simply about who leads and who follows, but about the very human need to step outside the roles we inhabit in everyday life. Many women secretly long for this dance because it allows them to experience sides of themselves that are rarely given permission to exist. In daily life, many women carry enormous responsibility. They organize, they manage, they make decisions for their families, their careers, their children. They are strong, reliable, efficient. But in the private space of intimacy, some of them secretly crave the opposite: to lay down control, to feel the freedom of surrender, to trust their partner enough to let go. It's not about weakness. It's about the exquisite relief of not having to be in charge just for a moment. And then there are others, just as many, who desire the reverse, who live lives where they are expected to be quiet, accommodating, restrained. For them, intimacy becomes the one place where they can claim power, take the lead, be bold. To hold control is, for them, to taste a freedom they are denied outside. This is what fascinates me. Control and surrender are not opposites. They are partners in the same dance. You cannot surrender unless you trust that someone else can hold you. You cannot control unless the other person allows themselves to be guided. And when this exchange is done with love, it becomes electrifying. It is not about domination, it is about permission. I recall a woman once telling me, the sexiest thing he ever did was not touching me at all. It was looking me in the eye and saying, trust me. In that moment, she was not simply aroused. She was seen, she was held. She was given the gift of safety to let go. That is the hidden truth behind the fantasy of surrender. It is not about losing power, it is about gaining freedom. But there is another side as well. A woman who once felt invisible told me, when I decided to take the lead for the first time, I felt more powerful than I ever had in my entire life. For her, intimacy became a stage for reclamation, a place where she could say without words, this is who I am, and I will be unapologetic about it. The beauty of this dance is in the oscillation, the back and forth, the exchange of roles. Sometimes you are the one holding, sometimes you are the one being held, Sometimes you command, sometimes you yield. Each position unlocks a different part of the self, a part that the world outside rarely allows to breathe. Women secretly long for that oscillation because it makes intimacy feel alive, unpredictable, and deeply human. And here lies the essence of erotic energy. It thrives not in sameness, but in contrast. It is in the tension between strength and vulnerability, between guiding and yielding, between control and surrender, that desire finds its spark. For many women, the unspoken wish is simply this: to be given the space to experience both. Long before we learn to speak, we learn to feel. The body becomes our first language, and in intimacy, it remains the most honest one. Women often tell me that what they long for is not just to be touched, but to be listened to through touch, because the body, when attuned, says things the mouth cannot. It reveals comfort, hesitation, longing, fear, desire, all without a single word. I remember asking a woman in one of my sessions, "When do you feel most desired?" She didn't hesitate. "When he slows down enough to notice me," she said. "When I feel he's not just doing something to me, but with me." In that response lies a profound truth. Intimacy is not performance, it is attunement. It is the ability to sense, to pause, to match rhythm, to adjust to what the body is saying in real time. Too often, we are taught to focus on actions, on techniques, on what we should do. But women secretly crave something much deeper: presence. They want to feel that their partner is not rushing toward an end goal, but is immersed in the moment with them. Presence is not measured in duration, it is measured in attention. The way a hand lingers, the way an embrace slows, the way a breath synchronizes. These small gestures communicate a listening that words cannot achieve. I once witnessed a couple struggling to reconnect after years of routine. When I asked them to sit in silence and simply place their hands on each other, the woman began to cry. Not because of the touch itself, but because of the way she felt seen in that moment. It had been so long since her partner's touch carried presence instead of duty. That is the secret many women carry. They long for a partner who doesn't just move, but notices. Who doesn't just touch, but feels. The body speaks in subtleties: a shiver, a tightening, a release. These are signals, invitations, warnings. When a partner learns to read them, intimacy becomes a conversation without words. And when that conversation flows, women feel not only aroused but understood, not only touched but recognized. Desire, for women, is rarely about grand gestures. It is about micro moments. It is about a hand brushing hair out of the face slowly enough to say, "I am here with you." It is about the way someone pauses instead of rushing ahead, creating space for anticipation to build. It is about the silence between movements, where presence speaks louder than any words. Women long for this language to be spoken fluently, because when it is, intimacy becomes more than an act. It becomes a dialogue. A dialogue where both partners are translators of each other's bodies, listeners of each other's silences, and co-authors of a story told without speech. Every woman carries within her an erotic imagination, a secret theater of images, stories, and sensations that belong to her alone. These fantasies are not admissions of dissatisfaction. They are expressions of possibility. They are a way of exploring identities, roles, and desires that may never appear in daily life. And yet so many women keep them locked away, hidden even from the people they love most. Not because the fantasies are shameful, but because voicing them feels risky. I recall one woman who told me, "I've had the same fantasy since I was 19, but I never dared to share it, not even with my husband, because I feared he would laugh at me or think less of me." And this is the secret many women hold. It is not the fantasy itself that feels dangerous. It is the vulnerability of revealing it. The question is not, will he do it with me? But will he still see me the same if I tell him who I am when I imagine? Fantasy is often misunderstood. We assume it is about wanting someone else, something else, a life elsewhere. But fantasy is rarely about another person. More often, it is about another version of ourselves. In fantasy, women can be bold when daily life requires restraint. They can be vulnerable when the world demands strength. They can be reckless, wild, playful, unafraid. Fantasy allows them to touch parts of themselves that reality has taught them to hide. And so the longing is not always for the fantasy to come true exactly as imagined, but for the freedom to let the imagination breathe inside the relationship. Women secretly wish for a partner who listens with curiosity instead of critique, who asks, "Tell me more," instead of, "What's wrong with what we already have?" They wish for a partner who can hold their confession with care, who understands that imagination is not competition, but invitation. There is a tremendous intimacy in daring to reveal the unspoken. When a woman shares her fantasy, she is not only offering an idea, she is offering trust. She is saying, "This is the most hidden part of me. Will you still accept me?" And when her partner responds with openness rather than judgment, something profound happens. The walls between them dissolve, and desire takes root in the soil of safety. Sometimes it is not about acting out the fantasy at all. Sometimes it is enough to acknowledge it, to play with its energy, to weave elements of it into reality in a way that feels safe and playful. A whispered scenario, a change of tone, a role reversed. These small bridges between fantasy and reality keep desire alive, because desire thrives not in repetition, but in imagination. The tragedy is when imagination is left outside the relationship, forced into secrecy, turned inward instead of shared. When that happens, intimacy begins to lose its spark. But when fantasy is welcomed, when imagination is invited in, the relationship becomes a space not only of comfort, but of aliveness. Women long for that invitation, to bring the fullness of who they are, not only their bodies, but their minds, their dreams, their inner theater. And so the secret many women carry is this: they don't only want physical connection, they want a space where their fantasies can breathe, where imagination can be celebrated, where desire can be more than an act. It can be a story you write together. So here's the truth. Intimacy is not about how many things you do or how well you perform them. It is about how deeply you dare to see and be seen. Women do not secretly long for a perfect lover. They long for a present one. They long for laughter that makes the heart lighter, for trust that makes surrender possible, for attention that makes the body feel listened to, for imagination that makes desire come alive. When we strip away the fear, the judgment, the silence, what remains is a space of discovery. And in that space, intimacy stops being a duty and becomes an adventure. The taboo becomes curiosity. The routine becomes play. The secret becomes a bridge instead of a wall. So I leave you with this invitation. Do not ask your partner only, "What do you want?" Ask instead, "What would delight you? What do you dream about? What have you never dared to say?" And then, when she trusts you enough to answer, receive it not as a challenge, but as a gift. Because in the end, the measure of intimacy is not what we do to each other. It is what we awaken in each other. And when you create the kind of love that allows secret desires to emerge into the light, you will discover that intimacy is not a place you arrive at. It is a garden you keep alive.